request to have a threesome is outrageous and is morally wrong. She wants to have a threesome with another woman, and you don't want to do it?
No. No. Well, good morning, everyone. I'm Roland Smith in the UPN9 News studio. It is a sad and tragic day for America.
Indeed it is. I'm Brenda Blackman. The United Nations was hit by a series of terrorist attacks this morning, which left the World Trade Center destroyed and Washington under siege. The attacks began at 8:45 when a jetliner crashed into the World Trade Center. A second plane crashed into the Twin Towers about 15 minutes later. The crashes left fiery, gaping holes in the 110-story buildings.
And about an hour later after that, there was a huge explosion at the base of the South Tower. That's One World Trade Center, and part of the building collapsed. After about 20 minutes later, the second tower also collapsed in flames. About 50,000 people work in the World Trade Center, and witnesses say that they saw bodies falling from the Twin Towers and people jumping out.
People ran down the stairs in panic and fled the building. The entire area of Lower Manhattan was enveloped in smoke. President Bush called the attacks the work of terrorists and ordered a full-scale investigation to, quote, hunt down the folks who committed this act.
Officials say that one of the planes that hit the World Trade Center was an American Airlines flight. It was Flight 11 heading to LA that had been hijacked from Boston. Now, about an hour later, a third plane crashed into the Pentagon in Washington, D.C., in Virginia. The entire Pentagon was evacuated, and part of the Pentagon collapsed.
There was also a fire on the Washington Mall. Officials ordered the White House evacuated after the Secret Service received what it described as a credible threat that the White House would be attacked.
The Treasury and the U.S. Capitol, the State Department, were also evacuated. We were seeing just there on that video recorded earlier a plane that had flown in from the south, it looked like, and hit that second tower. At about 11 a.m., the government ordered all federal office buildings in Washington evacuated, and in Chicago. The giant Sears Tower there was also evacuated. At the World Trade Center, heavy black smoke billowed into the sky above that gaping hole in the sides of that 110-story Twin Towers. Here it is again. There's the plane coming in, Brenda. So they say it was a 767 American Airlines hijacked out of Boston heading to L.A. That's about all the information we have at the moment as to what that was. Obviously, it seems to be, and nobody is confirming it yet the President of the United States is saying it is a terrorist attack.
Now we're going to go to Washington Pictures and take a look at the Pentagon. Firefighters there, firefighters being called in from all over the country, everywhere, fighting the flames in Washington as well as here in New York City. By the way, when that second plane hit in New York, the fireball of flame and smoke that erupted, I mean, it just left originally just a gaping hole in the glass and steel tower. Look, we're seeing firefighters now coming out.
You know, in New York City, all of the kids who are in school today, because the school system started just a few days ago, are being kept in their classrooms and will stay there until parents can come and collect them. But that's all throughout New York City.
We're seeing police and emergency personnel all around the country, of course, being put on alert, as is the entire country right now, being put on terrorism alert. Look at the explosion.
That's the collapse of one of the towers. I can't tell which one it is because of the debris and smoke. This was all recorded earlier. That was the second one that collapsed. That was probably just about an hour and a half ago.
Thousands of pieces of what appeared to be office paper first came drifting. You could even see it as far away as Brooklyn, about 3 miles from the tower, and that was only in the beginning. And as you had mentioned earlier, President Bush called the attack a national tragedy and, quote, an apparent terrorist attack.
Yeah, Ira Ferber, who is a former NTSB, that's National Transportation Safety Board, he was a spokesman, discounted the likelihood of an accident, obviously. And as a result of this attack, all the bridges and tunnels between New Jersey and New York City, Brooklyn, Queens, et cetera, are closed. Air traffic halted throughout not only the New York area, but certainly nationwide about, I'd say, a half hour to an hour after the first attack.
Hospital scenes like this one, of course, being played out all around the area. People are being told if you do not have an emergency situation to just not go to the hospitals. Many schools have even become triage areas in the city. All hospitals, of course, being utilized right now. Emergency personnel needed.
We have to compliment, of course, all of our colleagues who are from other stations, both radio and television, who have been covering this since a little bit before 9 this morning. And I heard on the radio just a little bit ago, Mayor Giuliani, of course, was speaking to the media, and he was saying, if you are south of Canal Street, get out. His words, get out. Walk slowly, he said, but get out.
A tragedy, a horrible day for this area, and of course, a horrible day for the fear that has spread nationwide. And of course, you mentioned the air traffic being halted all around the country, coast to coast, no planes flying. Of course, there was a report, though, of a plane going down in Pennsylvania. Not only did we have the situations in Washington and New York, but also now in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, that report was a Boeing 767, presumably, again, I want to say presumably, an American Airlines plane, because they seem to have been the ones that were subjected to the attack, probably because of the name American, if in fact this is and is proven to be a terrorist attack. It went down east of, I think it's Jenkinstown, Pennsylvania. And we have no further information on that, but as soon as we get it, we will tell people. And we should tell people, Brenda, where they're watching and how they are.
Of course. Comcast of New Jersey, also on Dish Television and the Dish Network and DirecTV, because so many of the broadcast facilities have their satellite dishes atop the World Trade Center. So many places are not able to get out and get you information right now.
Back to Mayor Giuliani for a moment, a quote from him said, we sense, and I'm quoting, we sense there were a tremendous number of lives lost.
The president, of course, in Florida, Mayor Giuliani, as well as Governor Pataki today in New York City. We've heard from the mayor so far and hope to hear from the governor as well. All international flights, by the way, heading to the United States have been diverted to Canada. All New York City subway lines shut down. Trading on Wall Street, of course, suspended. And we will, of course, have information about some other places as we get it. As you mentioned, with the schools, the school children are safe now at their schools, but as soon as parents come to pick them up, they can be picked up by their parents or guardians.
And I can imagine just the fear. I mean, you're a parent, I'm a parent, and so many of you out there that are joining us as we try to describe the horrific situation in New York City as well as at the Pentagon. Here's that video earlier with the plane coming into that South Tower. Watch this.
That was so incredible to watch first thing this morning.
It is extraordinary. For some reason, it reminded me of the tragedy of the Hindenburg in New Jersey back in the 30s.
And of course, the plane from Pennsylvania was reported to be a Chicago to New York flight. One of the ones earlier, we understand, was Boston to New York, the one that was hijacked.
Boston to L.A.
Boston to L.A. that was hijacked. Mm-hmm. And of course, all the information that we get, we're giving it to you, but of course, having to try and filter through so much of it.
Right. We have some eyewitnesses that we're going to take you to now. Let's just listen in.
What is happening? Anything else that you saw? Were you there for the second hit by the plane?
About 10 minutes later, the second building went off.
Did you see it?
Yes, I saw it. It just blew up. A big explosion. People started running. It was just chaos everywhere. Yes, I was right there. I was down in the basement. Came down. All of a sudden, the elevator blew up. Smoke. I dragged the guy out. His skin was hanging off, and I dragged him out, and I helped him out to the ambulance.
Okay, we're seeing FBI, and again, that was an earlier recount. By the time, this man was still close, of course, to the World Trade Center building, but within hours, you could not be in that area because it was covered with smoke, and smoke inhalation is one of the major problems that many of the hospitals are seeing now.
50,000 people work in those two buildings in the World Trade Center. There were reports earlier of people jumping out of the windows, falling, obviously, so many stories.
110 stories.
Knocked one of the towers into the other, bringing them both down. That disaster was averted, and bad as that.
We are taking a look at CNN and some of their reporters. That's Jeff Greenfield talking with, I can't tell who that was for a second, but describing what's going on. And we are using some of their pictures. All of us in the media in the New York City area are having difficulties in our broadcast because the television towers that would broadcast to the region were on top of the World Trade Center. There was only one station that still maintained a tower, and that's where the old towers used to be, on top of the Empire State Building. And here's the collapse of that. So you can see the towers going down at that point. Those were the towers that, in fact, sent the signal to your home sets.
And of course, we all have our personal eye views this morning of how we found out. When I was driving into work, seeing people drive along the side of the road, looking up at what has become a New York landmark, being in such shock, they would veer off the road. Many would just pull off the road. Some even had their video cameras, and they would just pull off in shock, stop, and you could just see them weep.
Well, within an hour and a half, they closed certainly the tunnels into the city and the bridges. For a while, people were being allowed to get out of the city, and I believe that's still the case at the moment. For me in the morning, Brenda, what I was doing, happened to be entered a new apartment that I had that overlooks downtown skyline, and I was on the phone with my wife when this happened. When the first explosion happened, I heard the explosion, looked out, and then saw the smoke coming from that first World Trade Center tower. And I said to her, "Oh my God, look at," I said to her, "the World Trade Center has just had an explosion." And she said, "Goodbye." And I called in here, as you did, and it just, the information in the news just kept developing into this unbelievable experience that this country has gone through. This is probably the first time a national terrorist has, organization, whoever that is, maybe Osama bin Laden or a collection of them, that has shut down the entire country.
Now, we're seeing pictures now here at the Pentagon. Of course, there were reports that the state capitol was under siege, and of course, as in any situation like this, there are so many rumors and reports, but that's what we try and filter out so that you get only the information we know about. You can see the pictures here. The incredible effort by firemen to try and get the building under control, but so many have also been evacuated, thank God.
That's a five-sided building, the Pentagon. It was built in 1941 through 43 to bring under one roof all the U.S. War Department offices, particularly during the Second World War. It was designed by a George Edwin Bergstrom, and I heard reports earlier and read some that part of it, and as you can see it there, part of that Pentagon building has collapsed.
And you mentioned Osama bin Laden earlier, and I do recall earlier reports, too, that the Secretary of State, of course, was taken away from the area. President Bush is in Florida. We do have the governor and mayor, the governor of New York and the mayor of New York City, of course, in Manhattan. But in one of the quotes from one of the wire services, it says, only a very small handful of terror groups is on the list of being reported as second to none who could pull off something like this, if it is indeed terrorism. And at the top of that list is, of course, as you mentioned, Osama bin Laden.
Let's recap here for a quick second. Again, you're watching us on Comcast cable in New Jersey, Dish Network, DirecTV, because all of the broadcast properties and towers have been destroyed. We're on top of the World Trade Center. But just as a quick recap, today was a horrific sequence of destruction from terrorists. 2 planes crashed into the World Trade Center. The twin 110-story towers collapsed this morning. Explosions also rocked the Pentagon, as we've been telling you, and fear, Brenda, has certainly spread across the nation.
And we're looking at pictures now of our crews finally getting into New York City and seeing the kind of mayhem. This looks like one of the movies you see. It doesn't look real, but it is indeed real. Police trying to get people out of the area. Our reporters and photographers, of course, are always allowed into areas that are traditionally roped off by that yellow tape. But you're seeing the photographers obviously running away because they're being told this is not a safe area. No one knows what could happen next. And, of course, 2 other explosions that followed.
This looks like collateral damage from the World Trade Center that would be near that whole area, downtown financial district. And obviously with the debris falling, fiery debris, explosions, it was a terrible scene and continues to be. You had a momentary flashback there for the Pentagon, but look at that.
Look at those people just dazed, trying to get out of the area. We see some sort of identification badge on the man. He could have worked for the World Trade Center or, with just a backpack. Apparently just regular people pieces of people's clothing. Of course, trying to breathe in all that as well as this officer is trying to do.
It's not immediately known, and it probably won't be for some time, how many people have been killed this morning.
I think we aren't even ready to think about those kinds of numbers. This looks like the worst thing that has ever happened to us. We've reported on lots of things in the past, but never anything like this. And of course, as we also look at some of the other wire copy that we had gotten in, authorities went on alert very early on coast to coast. We're seeing more pictures come in. People, policemen obviously being hurt. Those people out there trying to help others are also being injured.
Yeah, they have put out a call for all off-duty firemen, all off-duty policemen, all off-duty emergency workers, medical personnel to report as soon as possible. Part of the difficulty, Brenda, as you mentioned earlier, is that the tunnels and bridges into New York City have been closed.
And looking at those pictures this morning to know that the towers no longer stand in New York City. Again, looking at the second plane that crashed into the World Trade Center towers this morning.
50,000 people work in those buildings. It is perhaps the most audacious terrorist attack that has ever taken place in the world.
And that's a quote from Chris Yates, an aviation expert at Jane's Transport in London.
You know, it takes a logistics operation from a terrorist group involved that's second to none to pull off something like this. Usually we, meaning the United States, has some kind of network of information that gets to you, and you get a warning, but apparently not today.
The pictures are just incredible. I mean, it's just unimaginable to have known that you saw the tower standing before and to see now and to see them just dissolve to rubble.
You know, President Bush, who was in Florida at the time of the attack, speaking to some school children, has ordered now a full-scale investigation to hunt down the folks who committed this act. Within several hours this morning, a helicopter crashed on a landing pad near the Pentagon. We're not sure whether that was part of the original explosion into the Pentagon or a secondary one as they were trying to cover the initial one.
Here's the president talking.
May God bless the victims, their families, and America. Thank you very much.
Remarks as he spoke to children this morning, and again, that was in Florida. And initially, his report in praying for the families and victims, initially, the Pentagon had not been hit at that time when he first spoke early this morning. He was not in Washington at the time, as we mentioned. He was in Florida. And it is just, this is the scene from the Hudson River.
That's extraordinary. There's the Statue of Liberty in the lower left of your picture. And you're looking directly toward the financial district in lower Manhattan. You know, authorities went on the alert from coast to coast. They halted all air traffic. They evacuated high-profile buildings. They tightened securities at strategic installations. The Situation Room at the White House in full operation. People were screaming, crying, running.
We've had a national tragedy. 2 airplanes have crashed into the World Trade Center in an apparent terrorist attack on our country. I have spoken to the Vice President, to the Governor of New York, to the Director of the FBI, and have ordered that the full resources of the federal government go to help the victims and their families and to conduct a full-scale investigation to hunt down and to find those folks who committed this act. Terrorism against our nation will not stand. And now, if you join me in a moment of silence. May God bless the victims, their families, and America. Thank you very much.
Frank Uciardo, one of our reporters, you've just listened to the president addressing a crowd in Florida this morning. And Frank Uciardo is now in lower Manhattan on the phone, live from the scene. Frank, what can you tell us?
Right now we are just across from City Hall by taking refuge in the basement of a drugstore down here with a lot of emergency personnel who use this as sort of a little command center. Just after the second plane hit the building, we were actually just arriving on scene and I was there with a cameraman, and we were looking upwards at the building, and then all of a sudden we started to see what looked like the top of the North Tower starting to collapse down towards the street. We were grabbed by police and we were running away from it with the police, the FBI agents, some ATF agents, just to get out of there because we thought we were going to be consumed by what was falling from the sky. And we took refuge in the basement of St. Peter's Church on Barclay Street, just about 2 blocks away from the World Trade Center there, and we were trapped inside. We could not get out. The scene outside was a complete white blizzard. You could not see out the windows of the church. It started to filter in and down into the basement of the church, so we had to leave the basement of the church, come back upstairs to try to breathe. We were putting rags over our mouths. It really became quite a situation. They were bringing people in by stretchers. In fact, we interviewed a person who was in the 10th floor of the World Trade Center tower when the first plane hit. He was a bank teller. He said he heard a large explosion, and he was knocked to the ground, and he was bloodied. And he was being evacuated when the second plane hit, and again he was on the ground, and he was lucky to get out alive. He was evacuated into the basement of the church building, and he stayed with us there for about an hour until the emergency people could get him out. But it is one of the most horrific scenes imaginable at the base of the World Trade Center. Right after the second plane, you would look around on the ground, and you would see you'd see bags that would look like luggage. You'd see shoes, personal belongings strewn about the street with pieces of metal, machinery. You didn't know whether it was coming from the building or possibly it was luggage from an airplane. A lot of personal effects, papers, IDs, documents, and then this eerie shroud of white powder covering everything as it continued to come down from the top of the World Trade Center. Back to you.
All right, Frank, stay with us for just a second, can you, on this?
Yes, sir.
Is there a sense of panic at the moment, or are they trying to just gain control to figure out what to do next?
I've never seen anything like this in my 20 years in the business here. We have police and EMS. They're trying to get control of the situation because a lot of cell phone service is not working. The radios are going really crazy, so they're trying to communicate among a massive hysterical communication. And standing outside of City Hall there, you saw a lot of firemen and policemen. They were specifically the firemen. They were in the back of ambulances being treated. These were the first responders who responded to the first plane hit into the tower, who showed up, and they were caught when the second one was there. In fact, we talked to a firefighter who was in the back of one of the ambulances. He was a bit bloody, but he seemed to be okay. I mean, it was like they didn't know what had hit them, so they're trying to get their footing right now. A lot of the policemen and the firemen, they're trying to come into this particular drugstore to get supplies, gauzes, bandages from the drugstore, bringing them to treat people out in the street, taking water, whatever they can to scavenge from the inside of the drugstore to treat people out there on the scene, because they simply do not have enough in their ambulances to take care of who's on the street right now.
Frank, I would imagine it's a triage situation, is it not?
They're trying to set up several different areas. They had one command post set up, but the situation is so enormous that they were originally had set up St. Vincent's hospital. As I was coming downtown after the first plane hit the tower, they were lined up in front of St. Vincent's Hospital with empty stretchers and doctors and nurses waiting the arrival of people from the first initial plane hit. And that was the first place that was set up as a triage and emergency center. But down here, they're still trying to figure out where they're going to place the main command post.
Frank, thank you so very much. Just please stay there and stay safe. We will get back with you in a few moments. But right now, we're going to go with some other interviews that we have from other victims. And we also need to let you know that the ferries are now being used to transport people across the river to New Jersey hospitals. Some more pictures of people trying to escape that mayhem this morning.
You can see one of the reporters there, you notice, with the microphone, also running. I heard one of the radio guys, one of our colleagues from CBS Radio, said they were running like crazy because of the smoke that was, and the debris that was starting to fall and crowd into the entire area.
Just incredible panic. You're seeing people on top of buildings. You're seeing bodies being falling off buildings. And reporters, as you know, that's the duty, is to get out there and to cover it. And Frank Uciardo mentioning they had to go from one place to another just to try and be safe themselves and get the information to everyone. And we do have some interviews coming down in just a moment. But as you can see, can you imagine just being there this morning and having to watch and be a part of that, trying to get the story out and just trying to, the police trying to get the situation under control.
It's the most extraordinary thing that I've witnessed in many of my years of covering news events and tragedies, not only here, but in other countries. It's extraordinary.
And the mayor asking everyone to get out, especially everyone south of Canal Street. Let's listen.
There's people jumping out of windows. I've seen at least 14 people jumping out of windows. It's horrific. I can't believe this is happening.
Anything else that you saw? Were you there for the second hit by the plane?
About 10 minutes later, the second building went off.
Did you see it?
Yes, I saw it. It just blew up. A big explosion. People started running. It was just chaos everywhere. People jumping out. People just kept jumping and jumping and jumping. And you could still see they were alive because they were flailing around.
Now, you know, 50,000 people, as we've been telling you, have worked in those Twin Towers. The first buildings of the towers opened up in 1970. The towers in the plaza, of course, were not completed until 1976. The last building completed in 1988. I can remember, Brenda, in 1976, as a reporter in this town, standing on top of the World Trade Center as they topped it out. It was a big ceremony. The mayor was there, the city officials, etc.
And, of course, as you can see, these people are emotional. Judy Chavez is going to talk to us now.
We arrived here at Newark Airport just a short time ago. The airport is at a standstill. As you know, the FAA shut down all takeoffs nationwide, so we have air passengers stranded out here as well as flight crews and workers. Nobody is allowed inside Newark Airport. There are people out here kind of just waiting around, not knowing what to do next. They're on their own. Now, I talked to a few people who are stranded here, some folks from Wales that just arrived this morning into Newark, and they were heading into Manhattan. They could not leave. They don't know what to do. People are just waiting to get out of here. I'm with Pat Enders right now. She was actually on Continental Airlines this morning waiting to depart from Newark, heading to Tampa. What do you think about all of this?
Oh, I think it's absolutely awful, and I'm so frightened. My family has dropped me off here this morning. I don't know how to get back to them, and I have no means of transportation, nothing. So I'm kind of scared. Thank you.
And that's basically the feeling around here at Newark Airport. Stranded passengers, people standing next to trucks, listening to the radio. Once again, all areas of the airport are closed off. I did talk to a few eyewitnesses who were inside the terminal when they saw two planes actually hit the World Trade Center, and they described it as a very shocking scene, as you can imagine. Glass from a distance looking like sparkles shattering, and that's basically it. The planes are on the runway, not moving, and until we hear something from the FAA, we are just in that waiting mode along with these stranded passengers, crew, and workers here at Newark Airport.
You know, Judy, the FAA has, of course, shut down air traffic all over the nation, which, of course, affects all over the world.
Absolutely. We have passengers that were trying to head out of here to other parts of the United States as well as international flights. And, you know, there are folks here that were heading to the Dominican Republic. They don't even know what to do. I mean, basically they have their bags. If anybody checked in luggage, they don't have their baggage with them. I mean, everything is just
it's eerie.
It's a very eerie situation.
All right, Judy.
Out here.
Thank you, Judy. We'll go back to you off and on.
Let me just ask her one more question.
Sure.
Judy, I heard someone earlier on one of the radio reports saying how when they first heard the announcement that there would be no flights, they assumed it was typical airport travel day. We know when things were delayed or they would eventually get out. What was the feeling of these people knowing that, no, they won't get out at all to go anywhere?
Well, the feeling is frustration, and I, sympathize with them. They don't know what to do. They had plans, some of them business, some of them pleasure, and they're stuck here. They are basically on their own. They don't know what to do. Everybody's kind of waiting around either for family to pick them up or to try to get out of here by bus or taxi.
Right, Judy, and I'm sure that in time, certainly, these folks will find their way in and out of the airport. and get back to their homes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
But thank you for joining us, and
Live from Newark
we'll
Airport.
check back with you at Newark Airport at various times throughout this morning and this afternoon.
And of course, Frank Uciardo and so many other people, incredible people, are out there working hard to bring the information. And we're going to listen to some more witnesses in just a moment. But again, to recapture that incredible picture this morning, unimaginable, of a second plane going into the World Trade Center.
Let's listen in for a second.
Everything just went black. Everything came down, glass started popping. People got hurt, stuff went on top of them. And it was a big explosion. Everything got dark, real dark, like snow. You can see behind me, oh, this is not snow. This is all from the building. It was a terrible nightmare.
And I look up, and the tower just starts crumbling down. And everybody in the street just stops and started crying and bawling. And I'm standing next to a fireman. He said, yeah, they just bombed the Pentagon, too. Standing in front of the Soho Grand Hotel. And the doorman, I went to firewall company, the doorman goes to me, wow, I never seen a plane flying so low. And we looked out at it, all of a sudden, boom, it seemed like it wasn't even